Joaquin Castro just called out top intelligence officials to their faces, accusing them of lying to the country. And he didn't hesitate to say it twice. What's really going on behind this war of words? Let's break it down.
My amendment is pretty simple. It would prohibit any funds from being used to install, maintain, or support any communications infrastructure in DoD facilities that don't follow security protocols. And it prohibits the Secretary of Defense from communicating about classified military operational plans using insecure methods. I'm proud to represent San Diego, the biggest military community in the country. And when I go home, it's my job to look those military family members in the eye and tell them I'm doing everything in my power to keep their loved ones safe. That's why I find it so disgraceful that Secretary Hegseth was so cavalier and reckless with sensitive information about an imminent military strike, jeopardizing operational integrity and potentially putting our service members' lives at risk. I would expect our top military advisor in this country to have the utmost care and caution and reverence for our service members' safety. But as we all know, that is not the type of Secretary of Defense that we have. In April, the Associated Press reported that Secretary Hegseth used Signal to discuss classified military operations and had an internet connection that bypassed the Pentagon security protocols set up in his office to use Signal on his personal computer. That shows a blatant disregard for our security protocols that shouldn't be repeated. I know every person on this committee cares deeply about the safety of our service members, so I hope that there will be unanimous support for my amendment to protect classified information and the safety of our service members. I yield back.
Chair recognizes himself. Much like the previous amendment, this is just another political attack on the Secretary of Defense. Everyone with a clearance is briefed on proper handling of classified information and must sign an appropriate oath. We should let the ongoing review play out. Any action before that process is complete would be premature. I oppose the amendment and now recognize gentlelady from Pennsylvania, Ms. Houlahan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I am rising in support of Ms. Jacobs' amendment, which is a more narrowed version of Mr. Ryan's 5494. As she mentioned, it prohibits the SecDef from communicating about classified material using personal devices and insecure methods, and it states that no funds can be used to install or to maintain or support any communications infrastructure in DoD facilities that are not in compliance with relevant standards. Rules for thee and not for me seems to be the law of the land right now when it comes to the Secretary of Defense. When I held a top secret clearance in the Air Force, how to manage sensitive information was practically drilled into me, as it is into all of our service members. And if I had done what Secretary Hegseth did as a junior officer, I would have resigned and likely expected to be prosecuted and perhaps jailed. Secretary Hegseth seems to have forgotten his training, or perhaps has no regard for how it applies to him, all while he talks relentlessly about leaks and accuses people of being untrustworthy and disloyal to the administration and to this nation. More than once, he's used a publicly available and non-secure and non-approved messaging app to share details about forthcoming military action, despite having every tool at his own disposal to have these classified conversations in secure networks. His negligence could have put our service members at risk, and it could have killed them. But he and other members of the administration have continued to downplay the situation, including in front of this committee. If members of this committee were really true to themselves, I very much believe that they know that we shouldn't even have to have this amendment codified. But sadly, with this particular Secretary of Defense, here we are. This is where we are. And we should collectively, bipartisanly, be supportive of it. What Secretary Hegseth did has had no repercussions for him. So I guess we genuinely, legitimately need a law. I believe that if Secretary Hegseth had any decency, he would have long ago resigned over this conduct or had some sort of announcement of reform. But until then, I guess we need a very specific law. So I ask the committee to be supportive of this amendment. And as Mr. Bacon said, if there are other ways other than the previous amendment to perhaps be supportive without restricting the funding at a 75% level, he perhaps would be supportive of that. I would ask the committee members to really think within themselves, dig deep, and understand that we only need a couple of us to step forward, in addition to the ones who already have, to decry this particular behavior and to support this particular amendment. And with that, I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back.
What you just saw wasn't a casual disagreement. It was a high-stakes moment where Congressman Joaquin Castro stood his ground and accused top intelligence officials of lying directly and without softening the language. And that's rare in a hearing room like this, where most exchanges are tightly scripted and diplomatic. Castro's frustration comes from experience. He sat on the House Intelligence Committee for years and knows how the classification system works. And in his view, the claim that certain high-level conversations wouldn't be classified just doesn't match reality. We're talking about discussions among national security leaders, the kind of information that, if it involved foreign adversaries like Russia or China, would almost certainly be locked down under the highest security protections. In intelligence work, it's not just the content that matters, but how that content is obtained, the sources and methods that, if revealed, could compromise future intelligence gathering. That's why Castro is so incredulous here. To him, treating foreign officials' communications as classified, but not extending the same treatment to sensitive U.S. discussions, is inconsistent and potentially reckless. But this moment was about more than just a disagreement over classification policy. It was about trust, credibility, and transparency in government. When the public hears that intelligence officials have made a claim that doesn't pass the smell test for people with years of insider knowledge, it raises questions about what else might be shaded, softened, or omitted entirely. And in national security, a credibility gap can be just as dangerous as a security gap. Then came another striking exchange. Castro pressed the administration on its use of the Alien Enemies Act, a law from the early 1800s that gives the president sweeping powers during wartime to detain or deport foreign nationals. The law was last significantly invoked during World War II to detain German and Japanese nationals. Now, it's being used to deport alleged members of a Venezuelan gang. The legal justification hinges on the idea that the U.S. is under invasion by Venezuela. But here's the kicker. The intelligence community's own public threat assessment says nothing about any such invasion or state of war. The Director of National Intelligence confirmed it. There's no assessment that we're at war or being invaded by Venezuela. That matters because if you invoke wartime powers without a wartime reality, you're stretching the law beyond its intended limits. That's not just a legal issue, it's a constitutional one, and it sets a precedent for using extraordinary powers in ordinary times. It also reveals a potential pattern, justifying major policy actions with claims that aren't backed up by the intelligence community's own findings. Castro also pointed to contradictions between the threat assessment and the administration's actions. For example, the assessment highlights fentanyl trafficking as a top threat, yet cooperation with Mexican law enforcement has been frozen, and there's even been talk of invading Mexico. It warns about Russian cyber capabilities, yet a key cybersecurity unit focused on stopping Russian attacks was shut down. To Castro, these contradictions aren't minor policy differences. They're signs that the government's stated priorities and its actual decisions are pulling in opposite directions, which could make the country less safe. So what's the bigger lesson here? Intelligence is supposed to be the sober, fact-based foundation of national security decision-making. If those facts are being selectively applied, downplayed, or overridden for political purposes, the result is a weaker, more vulnerable United States. Castro's accusations weren't just about one document or one hearing. They were about whether Americans can trust that the decisions made in their name are grounded in truth. This is the kind of confrontation that cuts to the heart of democracy, the need for oversight, accountability, and honesty at the highest levels. When those break down, the risks aren't abstract. They can affect everything from military readiness to civil liberties. If you believe government decisions should be based on facts, not political convenience, make sure to subscribe. We cover these hearings not just to replay the fireworks, but to connect the dots so you understand the stakes for the country and for you.